And now, get ready.
We play the game to win.
Welcome to CatSpan with your host, Kat Beach, and co-host, Nikki Henning. It's just another day on the journey, so grab a drink, a bite to eat, and hang with them for a while as they walk down memory lane.
We play the game to win.
Welcome, everyone, to CatSpan. I'm so glad you could join us today. I am so blessed to have a very intricate and unique background with a lot of great friends and people in my different backgrounds to share with you. And so today I have a very, very special friend and colleague to introduce to you, and that is Leland Sklar. Leland, say a quick hello before I talk about
Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here. Kat is one of my absolute favorite people in the whole world. And the idea of being able to do this, we've talked about it for ages, and the fact that all of us are kind of sequestered at this point, hopefully being smart about it, it's a great opportunity for us to get together. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled that you are. And
I got to go now.
And that's the show. Thank you for joining us. And that is why Lee and I have had 20 years of a friendship. Oh, wow. So there's so many people watching. And when I announced that we were going to have this interview, I had so many inboxes and so many people from all different walks of life say they want to watch. And so they'll be in the chat room today. And so, yeah, this is going to be a fun experience. But for those of you who are my friends who are not in the music industry, who are watching, Leland Sklar is an iconic, he's not going to want me to say all of this, but I'm going to do it anyways, Lee. He's an iconic bass player who is just a very rare bird in that not only is he extraordinarily talented at what he does, people love to work with him. And so he has had just a lifetime of playing bass. And we'll go back to talk about a couple of other instruments in a minute. So for people who do not know Lee, which are very few, Lee's played for Jackson Browne. My gosh, I'm going to go on with them. Ray Charles, Bonnie Raitt, my favorite, James Taylor, Carole King, Phil Collins, played with Toto. The list goes on and on. You know what? There's one musical theater people. You have played this span from musical theater to hard rock to the list goes on. I want you to know that I have tremendous respect for you because your abilities are vast. And
well, more than anything, I'm happy to be a working musician. And that's really been the essence of my entire career. Is it's fun every time the phone rings and you have no idea what you're getting into. You know, I mean, it could be any genre, any artist, and I just kind of still after almost little over 50 years solid of doing this, I still pinch myself every time the phone rings. Plus, I love to pinch myself, but I do pinch myself every time the phone rings. And I'm just thrilled to be going off to work and meeting new people and working on new projects. So it's been great.
An interesting moment to lead into this moment, how we met each other. Okay, for CatSpan. I don't want to make this about me, but I've got to say that was probably that moment when Ned Albright, who has produced my original album, he had a conversation with me. I was in Miami and I was going to do my first album, Love Me Out Loud, in Los Angeles. And he said, I want to have the perfect group. And this is who we want, Kat. So whatever we have to do to make this happen. And I said, and I was very green at the time. And so for everybody listening who are in my music world, this was in the very beginning, just a couple of years ago.
You were only that bit. You were just a little tiny thing at that point, little bitty thing.
Teensy. I must have been like 12.
Teeny cat. You were a kitten.
Right, I was a kitten back in the day. Yeah, right. Okay, so we'll just say it was yesterday. Anyway, so he says, Kat, we're going to get them. And I said, well, that shouldn't be so difficult in my experience. And he said, no, actually, Kat, to get them all in the same room at the same time for a number of days is going to be challenging. And I thought, okay, well, I just know this is going to happen. So long story short, it was Lee Sklar, Dean Parks, Herman Matthews. We needed Gia Ciambodi and Kim Yarbrough.
Yeah.
And I believe that was it. I believe that was the core of it. And I said, well, of course we're going to make this happen. And he made it happen. You all made it happen.
Yeah.
And
it was great.
well, it was hysterical in that I was so green. And Lee, you may not know this, so I'll just share it with you for the moment, and everybody else can laugh with us. The day of, early in the morning, I went into it was the Kinko's or something of the sort, and I printed out all of the lyric sheets. Okay, this is before I realized that you guys did not need my lyric sheets. I had 3-ring binders. I had the lyric sheets. I had all the plastic, everything, and I'm there, and I'm getting it together. And this is before GPS time for everyone, so I did not know exactly how to get to Ned if there were any issues, roadblocks, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And so I've got all of these. I've got like 8 binders. I'm ready to go. Trying to show up with my A game. And I get to a point on the way to Ned's, and Ned is in Marina Del Rey, and there was a roadblock for a water main break or something of the sort. And I started to panic. I'm thinking, these are the A-list musicians of LA. I'm going to be late. And yes, everybody, you're welcome to laugh. Everybody who knows me, yes, and even my father, showing up on time is important. So I am trying to figure out a way around, and I get there, and yes, Lee knows I was late. And it was great because I'm handing them all binders with lyrics, and these are musicians who I honor so deeply.
Who can't read.
They're like, right, can't read, right? That's right, exactly. You guys are not intelligent at all. You guys are extraordinary. But I found out later, Ned looked at me and said, why did you bring them the lyric sheets? I said, I thought that was great. So anyways, long story short, what an amazing moment. To walk in late was embarrassing. To walk into such an incredible group of musicians. Now that was, I don't quite have words for that because I was very nervous, but you guys were just gorgeous human beings. You made it so okay just to be myself, and whatever music came out. So I'm going along with that, Lee, with you never know what's going to come across your tongue.
Yeah. Well, it was great. I mean, as soon as we sat down to do the first tune, I mean, first off, you couldn't have asked for a better drummer than Herman. And you can never ask for a better guitar player than Dean Parks. And so it was one of those things. As soon as we got to the first tune and you started singing, we all just kind of looked at each other and smiled and said, "Oh, this is gonna be great. Let's do it." And it's led to a great friendship and a great relationship musically and personally. And but I was thrilled. I love working with Ned, and Ned's really always come up when he comes up with artists. He really finds the right people, and it was great. I'm thrilled that we did that record. I'm still very proud of that record, and I hope we get to do more down throughout the years.
We will for sure. And actually, I'd be remiss not to mention that what we're going through right now is a challenging, obviously very challenging time in the world. Yeah. And so Love Me Out Loud, and I won't, it's not to pitch my record, but there are a couple songs on there that were really written toward a tremendously challenging time in my life. And so I don't think I've ever been able to say this to you, Lee, but I honor you, and I'm grateful that you were part of that, because that was a hard moment in my life, and you said it, and it helps a lot of people.
That's great. That's great.
But I don't want to be about me.
Well, why are we here otherwise?
Right, exactly. We're all about me.
What's the name of this show? It's you, babe.
It's the CatSpan. No, but you know what? Interestingly enough, I know that there are a lot of people watching who may or may not understand a bass player. And so this is important for me to share as some knowledge. Can you explain to the average person who may not know, they listen to a band, but they may not know about the intricate pieces. But why is the bass player and the drummer such an intricate piece, and why are they the most powerful piece of a band?
I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. You can almost look at it as building a house. And if you don't have a great foundation to build a house, it doesn't matter how fancy a house you build on top of it. It's going to collapse at some point and fall apart. The bass and drums really are the fundamental. The drums are certainly the rhythmic aspect of the song and creating that feeling. And the bass is really it's the foundation structure of the musical structure of the music, but it's also kind of the liaison between the drums and piano, guitar, and all that. And you can dictate with bass subtle changes within the music just by your placement of notes and your choice of notes. I've always loved the position that bass takes in music. There's a tremendous responsibility that comes with it. I know when I've been on tours, a lot of times, like while the guys are all hanging out and doing stuff, I'm like sitting in the dressing room with headphones on, working on parts, and they would always go, "How come you're like always in there working on this?" I say, "I'm the only guy in the band that has to know the downbeat." I mean, the drums, they can hit anything. It's not a commitment to a tonality. Guitar player, keyboard player, any of those guys, violin, whatever's in the band, if they're not sure what's going on, they can lay out for a second until they hear where it's going. I've got to be there. So I got to know more than anybody exactly what's going on musically. And generally, when I've done tours and stuff, I don't just learn my parts, I learn everybody's parts. So that in any given time, I'm really, completely aware of what's going on musically with it. I'm not just sitting there. It'd be like being an actor who's only learned his lines and has no clue what the movie is. He's just doing the lines they were sent in their script, where a really good actor knows the entire scenario of the movie and knows how to interact with everybody within it. So the bass is really it's really is the fundamental foundation. But I always love when people come up to me and they go, "Oh, you're the guy who goes boom, 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 boom." Yeah, that's me. That's me. It's me all over. But I've been really having fun. We're all trying to make the best of these really difficult times that we're all in right now. And any really, caring person at this point is pretty much quarantining themselves into their house and can't do much of anything except some, important getting groceries or whatever. But I finally kind of was sitting there day before yesterday, and I went, a lot of guys come up to me or write to me and they go, "Man, I love what you play on that song. I wish, like, I saw you live. I wish I could have heard it a little better because we were in arenas or stadiums and stuff." So what I'm doing right now is I'm taking the entire last tour we did with Phil Collins. Yeah. I have a board mix of it, and every day I'm posting songs in order, and I'm featuring my bass parts. I'm doing it on YouTube and then putting it on my Facebook page, so you can hear the song in the background, but my bass parts are all in front, and people are already going, "Oh, I had no idea that there was that passing tone, or you were doing octaves there," and so I'm really digging this, and I'm going to do the whole album. And then I'm going to probably do a bunch of stuff that I've just done on Judith Owen's last record.
Yes.
I might do some Toto in there, and plus we've got our new band, The Immediate Family, and I might do some stuff from the first album because the new album's being finished, and I don't want to tease anybody with anything there because it's not complete. We're finishing mixing right now, so that's fun. But people can get more of an idea of what bass is all about if they go to my page and just check out these videos. I've got 3 of them up right now.
And scream out your page.
Well, no, it's just my Facebook page.
Or your Facebook page.
And it's a public page. And also, I've got them if they just go on YouTube. Because that's the only way I can link them is I'm putting them on YouTube and then sharing them to my Facebook page. So they could check it out there. But it's a little insight into actually what the bass is doing, and people can now go, That's what he does. Oh crap! Geez, that's easy. My Chihuahua could do that.
No, that's
I'll tell you,
Hey,
the greatest thing. I have a friend who's now playing with the group Chicago named Ramon Islas, and he's a really great percussionist drummer. And I've done some projects for him out at his house. He lives pretty close to me, and his dog passed, but they had a little beige Chihuahua. And one day I went up to the house and his dog eyebrows on it. I went, dogs don't have eyebrows. What is wrong with this picture? So, a little story.
just just the fun little stories.
Yeah.
Hey, Kat, we have a question. We have a question from the chat room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Daniel Hales says, "Hey, I got a question, Lee. Big fan. What are the top 3 reasons your phone keeps ringing with people wanting to hire you?" So that was the question.
I'm pliable, and now I think there's a lot of aspects to working in this business. One of beyond you've got to have chops. But to me, it's really I'm a song person. I've spent my entire career working with some of the greatest songwriters ever in the generation. I mean, starting with James Taylor, it really didn't get much better than that. And it really taught me about songs. And when I learned really early on that you don't, as a musician, impose yourself on the music you're doing. You figure out how to contribute to it, to make your parts valuable, and make every note count that you can. I also look at it as I treat it. It's one thing to play your part, but I get really pissed off in the studio, like when we finish a track, and guys don't go listen to the playback. They're sitting there on their phone talking, just hanging out. I go, what are you doing? Let's get in there, listen, you contribute. I've thrown out millions of ideas on projects, and I always tell people, I said, everything I do is etched in mud. Being involved and being a part of it is really important. And also, I sort of feel like a cheerleader on a lot of things. I mean, I see a lot of guys that sit there and they're kind of wallpaper, and sessions, especially some sessions, go on really long. And it's really nice just to come in with energy and just keep everybody focused and, let's stay right on this. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's really multifaceted. There's a lot of between mind and heart, chops, caring, and feeling fortunate that something you would have done as an avocation is your vocation. It's a very fortunate place to be in life.
And I'll jump in and say that you're comfortable to work with, and that why that's important is we're all coming in with lyrics and music and a story of our lives, and we want to know that the musicians that are there are going to really truly be open to coloring that moment.
Yeah.
But also being respectful and kind in that moment. You were that way, and you've been that way with everybody's music. I will tell you, you brought up Judith Owen earlier. I have the utmost respect for Judith Owen. I love her music, and you colored it beautifully.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
Yeah, she's very special. If you haven't listened to Judith Owen, everyone, please indeed go listen.
She's a piece of work.
She sure is, in a great way.
Yeah, all the best.
We got 2 more questions. If you guys want to do more.
Before we go to the questions, can we jump, if they're not right into that same vein? Are they, Tom, in the same vein? Because I want to jump into James.
Actually, they're pretty good questions.
Babu, let's go to him.
Okay, first question is from Matt Creeks. He's a fan. He says, regarding your work with Phil Collins, do you create the bass lines? What is your creative process like? And then we'll go to the next one. It's a little bit different.
It's very, very hard to say. What we would do is on almost all of Phil's music, we were recording one instrument at a time. It was not band recordings. Phil would come up with, now do you hear me? Because the screen has gone to your logo.
Hear you. Absolutely.
Okay, there you're back. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself because I'm bored.
I do it often, don't worry.
No, but Phil would, on his songs, would create like a drum loop or a drum part. usually with like electronic drums, and be humming some kind of a melody. And then I would come in and I'd have to listen to this and come up with bass parts to kind of, there was not a lot there to work with, like on Another Day in Paradise and songs like that. But with any of these artists, like Phil, I'm very accommodating. Generally, I would say 75% of the time, they want me to come up with parts for myself. Maybe 20% of the time, they'll have ideas of their own that they throw out just to say, what about this? And maybe 5 to 10% of the time, everything's completely thought out in advance, and they want it exactly that, because so many people, especially in this day and age, have done home demos and they're completely married to their demos, and their demos are almost like finished records, where in the old days, like with James, he would sit down with a guitar and play a song, and then we would all just jump in and find our parts, and then we would start recording them, and generally got them in a take or two. But nowadays, everybody sits home with their home studios, except me, because I don't have anything to record on at home because I've got too much yard work and puppies to deal with.
Great.
But like with Phil, it was pretty much left up to me to just to come up with my parts. And some of the songs, they were a little more completed when I heard them, and I got to really express myself. I forget the name of the song. Maybe Long, Long Way to Go might be the title, and it was off No Jacket. And I've got like 4 basses on the track. He just gave me free rein. I did piccolo bass, regular bass, something with an octave divider, distortion. And sometimes I'm allowed to kind of run free like that. One of the great records I worked on many, many years ago that has finally started to get notice was Gene Clark's No Other. No Other is the name of the album. Gene Clark was the original singer in the Byrds. And on one of the tracks on that, I think I've got 6 basses. It's almost all basses that are doing all the parts. And occasionally I'll work on something. I did Ariana, I think what's the name? Little Ariana with Vince Gill. And they were going to do a string date. And I said, I'll tell you what, let me experiment. And I did some fretless things on it with a volume pedal. And they said, oh, that's great. That takes care of the strings right there. And, so, yeah, but I enjoy the creative process. I really love that.
And Lee, explain to people just in layman terms, when you're talking about different basses, in layman terms, what does that mean to the average person?
Well, actually, I'm saying different basses, but what I'm talking about is different parts. More than anything, I'm orchestrating my bass. Like I might put down a track with just my normal bass, regular bass part, and then I might go in and double that part with the piccolo bass, which is an octave higher. It's a different instrument. It's strung an octave higher than the regular bass, and double the whole thing, because that gives me a different approach than like an 8-string bass would be. With the top thing, I could put effect on it, like phasing or chorus and things like that. Or I've done things where I've done regular bass, and then I'll add some parts with like really dark distortion or an octave divider. So when I'm talking different basses, it's generally like orchestrating different bass parts, and sometimes that requires different bass instruments.
Yes.
So
it's important for people to know, and because I think it gives them a brand new understanding and respect for musicians. Because
no respect, but understanding.
No respect, but
I don't want to respect.
Understand just a
I'm not Rodney Dangerfield. I'm not worried about respect.
Get no respect.
No, I get no respect.
You know what? Before we ask the next question, I really do want to take a little journey backward, because it's important to me and it's important to people listening. So back in California, when you were in school, in college, and I would like you to recount for everybody that moment when you met James Taylor and perhaps your first gig, because I believe that was the first time were playing bass live. Is that correct?
Well, no, it was the first kind of like big moment. I've been playing in bands forever, and that was like the one. But I was in college.
Caltech.
I graduated high school in '65, went right into college. I went to Cal State Northridge, which at the time was called San Fernando Valley State College out here in LA. And I spent the first 2 years in the music department and decided I just did not like it at all, because they were more encouraging you to go into teaching rather than performing. And I was like going to school with Tom Scott, and there was a bunch of guys up there. It was really great. And it's so funny because I was out today delivering something to a friend who can't get out. And I was, for some reason, I loved listening to Sinatra station on Sirius XM. And there was a thing that came on, and I knew Ray Brown was playing bass on it. It was one of the greatest jazz upright bass players that ever lived. And when I was in the orchestra at Valley State, there were 2 upright bass players in the orchestra. It was myself and Daryl Dragon, who was the captain of Captain and Tennille.
Oh.
And we were playing, and one day, Mr. Christensen, who was the orchestra music, he was the conductor, and he was in charge. A friend of his came over to sit in with the orchestra, and it was Ray Brown. And I'm sitting there with Daryl, and we're looking at each other going, holy shit, it's Ray Brown is playing with us. And we were so desperate not to suck, in there. And he was the sweetest cat, the best hang and stuff. I'll never forget that. But at the end of 2 years, I was really dissatisfied with that department. And I went up to the administration building and took a series of aptitude tests. And they said, well, my highest aptitude, I'd always done art. And they said my highest aptitude was in art and science. So I changed to the art department and was science art major. And I was thinking about becoming either a medical or a technical illustrator at that point. But towards the end of the 60s, in 69 especially, I was in a band here in LA called Wolfgang. And this really is the weirdest world we live in, that becomes like 6 degrees of separation, because Wolfgang, we were managed by this criminal named Bruce Glattman, who I don't think is with us anymore. And he had another band at the time called Zephyr. And Tommy Bolin was in Zephyr. And when I did Billy Cobham's Spectrum album, I walked in and there was Tommy playing guitar on it. And it became like one of the quintessential jazz rock fusion albums of the early 70s. But when I was in Wolfgang, our drummer was a guy named Warren Bugs Pemberton. And Bugs was from England, and he was in a group called Jackie Lomax and the Undertakers. They were rivals to the Beatles in the early days. And Bugs was great drummer. And he had a friend named John Fishbeck. And John Fishbeck owned a studio in LA called Crystal Recording Studios. And John did all the early Stevie Wonder records, engineered, produced Songs in the Key of Life and things like that. Well, at one of our rehearsals, he brings this friend of his with him, and it's James Taylor. And James had just gotten back from England. Nobody knew who he was or anything. Fire and Rain was recorded but hadn't been released yet. And he hung out for a couple of days with the band, and we listened to his tunes and dug him, and it was really fun. Well, shortly after that, he got offered a gig at the Troubadour in LA to kind of launch his career. And he remembered me from this rehearsal and told Peter Asher, who was managing him at that point. And they contacted me and brought me in, and it was going to be one gig. And basically, I'm still on the gig 50 years later, not with James, but it's just weird how these things happen. And that's why when I talk to people, I say, never turn anything down. The only time I ever turn anything down is if it smells like I'm going to get burned on it. Like it's just not kosher. But you just never know. I mean, I've walked into sessions that I go, nobody's ever going to hear this. This is not going to be good. But I'll meet somebody on the date that I might establish a long-term relationship with. And I've done that with drummers that I've met. And people say, well, who would you like to do, any ideas for our project? So look, I just worked with this cat. And let's call him. And people's careers have moved because of that. And I felt very blessed that I was in a situation. Had I not been in Wolfgang, I would have never met James Taylor. If Bugs didn't know John Fishbeck and John didn't know James. I mean, all these things come together in this weird way that you just go, who knows what's around the corner. And that's why I kind of take advantage of everything I can still that comes along, because I find it exhilarating and exciting. But
It brings to mind in acting school, because that's my original, was a classical acting. One of our coaches said, always know what you're doing, be the best at what you do, but be the one that they want to work with again.
yeah,
And that seemed to be the thing that rang true to me. Be the person that they want to be warm, be the person they want to work with again. So if you're great at what you do and you got a great personality, you're not full of yourself, so on and so forth, you're sure to have a long career in this. So I'm likening
yeah.
that to you, because you are the person that everybody just wants.
Well, so much of this is the hang.
Yeah.
And if you're a drag to be around, you're not going to get called, no matter how gifted you are. And especially when you're looking at the road, when you start looking at a month, 2 months, 6 months in a bus with a bunch of people, if you're a drag, it's not a pretty picture. So you really, you almost, it's like casting a movie. You really have to cast these groups to people that really are comfortable to be around. You don't have to all be the same. You don't have to think the same, be the same, but you have to at least have a level of comfort with the people where you're in a confined space. It's like being with a family that you didn't choose. I mean, and when it's great, it's unbelievably great. And when it's not, it's really a nightmare. And there's been a few really bad nightmares on the road over that, of really bad casting.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh, those moments. I want to roll from James Taylor into, and I'm going to guesstimate, and I could be incorrect. How did Phil Collins pop up?
I saw his number on a bathroom wall and called it. And
that's what I thought.
Said for a good time, call Phil.
Right.
No, actually, the first time Phil and I ever played was on a Lee Ritenour record. Back, I think, around '79, and I'd known Lee for years at that point. He's one of the great guitar players in the industry, and he was doing this record, and he called me to play on I think it was 1 or 2 tracks on his record, and I went in, and I knew of Genesis, and Phil knew of me through James and things like this, but we had never met before, and we hit it off, and he asked me if I would do his first tour, which was, I think, in '81. And I was already committed to James Taylor at that point for a tour. And I said, man, I wish I could, but I can't. But I said, I'd love to work with you. So if the opportunity comes up again, give me a shout. And in '84, he called me and he said, I'm going back in the studio. Can you come over to England? And we went into Townhouse Studios in London and cut No Jacket Required. And then the following year, we hit the road touring it. And the thing that was fascinating about that was, at that point, nobody really knew who Phil was, other than he was the drummer in Genesis. And that was kind of it. And when we started the tour, we were playing little small theaters and things. And then Susudio came out. And all of a sudden, man, it was on every radio station. Everybody was playing. And suddenly the tour took a quantum shift. And hold on, my screen just went up. So I'm pulling it.
It's okay. We can still see you. Even if it's paused, we can still hear you.
Okay, hold on. I hate to hold on.
You want to do a question?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Here, but we're back. Let me finish this real quick.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, we had to go from playing theaters to playing arenas overnight, and it was amazing. And then he did we won Grammys for it and all that stuff. But it was just kind of happenstance, being in the right place, of getting called to do a record. And next thing you know, we had a long-term relationship. I did No Jacket, but seriously, then we kind of parted ways in the '90s. And then he called me back in 2000 and asked if I would rejoin him. And we did a couple more years. And then he decided to retire at that point and took 10 years off. And then all of a sudden, few years ago, he called and said, I'd like to regroup and let's do it again. And we were going to do 3 shows. We were going to do a week at the Royal Albert Hall in London, a week in Cologne, Germany, at the big arena there, and a week in Paris at, I think it was Bercy. And all of a sudden, the response was so good that we ended up spending the next 2 years on the road playing the world.
And what a moment, by the way, to have a generation transitioned to know that his son was playing drums. And I've got to tell you that not only is his son is extraordinary, to know that you were part of both of those elements.
Yeah.
And you supported it. You were so brilliantly supportive. And that says a lot.
Nick is great.
Nick is awesome.
Nick is I remember at one point during the tour, I just looked at him. I said, man, if I'd ever had a son, I said, you would be the one I would love. I mean, we were really got close on it. And I loved, to an extent, mentoring with him like everybody did on the road. And he brought his game, and he deserved that seat. People would say, oh yeah, he's Phil's kid, of course he got the gig. I said, no, we auditioned him. We auditioned several people for this.
Wasn't he 17 years old?
Well, he was 16 when we started. He was 18 when it finished. And if because of circumstances in the world, nobody knows what's going to be happening. But Genesis is supposed to. They've announced a reuniting tour for the end of the year, and he's going to be the drummer doing that. So it's really great, but it's really thrilling to see other generations do this with Russ Kunkel, his son Nathaniel. I'd known Nathaniel since he was born, and he became one of the top engineer producers in Los Angeles. There's lots of these guys, Jason Bonham, I mean, it's like, it's really wonderful. There's something to be said in DNA. Ben Taylor is great. James Taylor's son.
Yep.
Yeah.
So before we get into this, that whole spectrum, the section, I want to talk about Toto, which I'm thinking comes after Phil. Well, I don't think, I know it came after Phil Collins, but the section, can you express to people what the section? I know Danny Korchmar, I know Russ Kunkel, and several others that created the section.
What the section was James Taylor's road band. It was Craig Durgee on keyboards, Russ Kunkel on drums, Danny Korchmar on guitar, and myself. Now, James wasn't, and this was in the very early 70s. James wasn't real big on long sound checks. So he would come out and check out his guitar and stuff and then just split. And we just loved playing. So we would just jam every day. And James was managed by Peter Asher, but he had another partner named Nat Weiss, who was a lawyer in New York, a divorce attorney. But Nat was really tight with Brian Epstein, and he was very kind of a principal in getting the Beatles to America and all this. Well, one day Nat came to us and he said, man, I want you guys to come to my room at the hotel. I want to play you something. And he played us something, and we said, man, that's great. Said, who is that? He goes, that was your sound check today. And they had recorded it, and we had no idea. And he said, you guys should think about doing something with this. And so we got kind of serious about it. And James, we were talking to him, and he goes, well, look, you're the rhythm section, so why not just call it the section? Because names are always a drag. I remember being in the studio years and years ago doing a project with Don Henley, and Don came over to me at one point. He said, do you think Eagles is a stupid name for a band? And I said, I thought Beatles was a stupid name for a band. Is it just make great music and whatever happens, happens? So we were the section, and the hard part for us was the music we really wanted to do was this instrumental kind of rock fusion. And I think when we got signed originally, we did 2 albums on Warner Brothers and 1 on Capitol. But when we got signed originally, I think because of our musical pedigree, they assumed that we were going to be like Poco or the Eagles or something like that. And I don't think they had a clue what to do with us at that point. But the most fun we had was Nat Weiss was managing Mahavishnu Orchestra with Billy Cobham and John McLaughlin, Jerry Goodman, all these guys, which was one of the most amazing bands of the fusion period. And so we were their opening act for like a 6-week tour and watched these guys every night. And I became friends with Billy Cobham on that, the drummer. And so when he got offered a record deal, he called me and asked if I would come to New York and do his album, which was Spectrum. And to this day, anywhere I go in the world, I mean, Jeff Beck, every time I see Jeff Beck, he comes up and goes, Stratus, man. I mean, he does one of the quintessential songs from Billy's album in his show. But if I go up to anybody and I just start going, they go, oh, God, you know, it's like, so it's amazing how, you know, once again, these doors and avenues open. So the section did the 3 albums. And after that, we just kind of, we all still play together and see each other, but things just kind of dissipated because there was no real support from label or anything like that, because they really never knew what to do with us. So we were like a cult band. I go to Japan and I still see our CDs. They still stock them on their racks there. And people still come up and want the section albums signed and all that. So it's pretty cool. But long story made longer, in the past couple of years, we've sort of, not the section, but as a group, we've sort of, some of us have reunited. So it's myself and Danny Korchmar and Russ Kunkel and Waddy Wachtel and another friend, Steve Postel, have formed a band called The Immediate Family. And it was because Danny got a record deal with a Japanese record label. And he decided, well, let me just call the guys and let's do this. And we did it. And we have a Japanese label, and we now have a US label. And we're just, like I said earlier, we're mixing our new album now. We went into Jackson Brown's studio. He gave us studio time there with Nico Golas Engineering, and we cut 17 tracks. And we've got it honed down to 12 for the Japanese release. There might be a little more on the American, I'm not sure. But we just finished a Rock Legends cruise from Fort Lauderdale to the Caymans. We were supposed to be back in Japan, but everything's on hold. We had a whole bunch of stuff lined up, and it's all sort of sitting on hold. But there was also a movie called The Wrecking Crew, yes, about the great studio musicians of the late 50s through the 60s that Denny Tedesco made. And his father was Tommy Tedesco, who's probably one of the greatest guitarists who's ever lived, and certainly as a studio musician. Well, they're all making a documentary film about our group now, and Denny's directing it. And so that'll be great. But everything depends on what happens in this, you know, this madness that's taking, you know, place right now. So nobody can get together and do anything. But for the movie so far, they've done a ton of interviews with everybody from James and Jackson and Ronstadt and Carole King, and I called Billy Bob Thornton came in because he's a big fan of the band, and all kinds of characters. And they got a bunch of footage of us in New York and stuff. So I'm excited about the album, and I'm excited about the documentary. But it's real fun to be on stage with a group of guys that, when I look across, for the most part, I've been looking at these guys for 50 years, and we're all still hungry and still have our A game up. It's not like it's not like one of those bands that's out doing their hits from 30 years ago. I mean, but we were telling everybody in the beginning, we're a cover band that only plays originals, because Cooch co-wrote a bunch of songs with Henley, you know, like Dirty Laundry and All She Wants to Do Is Dance. Waddy co-wrote Werewolves of London with Zevon, and there's so many songs. So we would do them the way we want to do them. And now the new album is all new original material, and it's really a ball. I mean, we're having such a good time. It is a kick-ass band. On this Rock Legends cruise that we were on, people all came up and said, "We had no idea who you guys were, but you're like,
yes, they had no idea."
Yeah. Well, they don't, because you hear the immediate family. That doesn't mean anything to anybody, you know. But we're building a brand,
and huge portion of people don't, and this is no disrespect to the average person, they don't pay attention to the musicians. They're so, and this is because I am a performer and I'm in the forefront. I can say this, they pay attention to the person in the forefront, possibly the guitarist, but they don't recognize what is really the soul of the band, and you
Yeah.
guys are extraordinary. I'm actually excited about this.
Oh, it's really cool. I will keep you in the loop on that, and maybe at
Yes.
some, as everything comes together, maybe we'll do another one of these shows, and I can go
Yes.
into depth about it all. But what was the other question that we had?
There was another one, but I also have to get to Toto, but because that's important to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
You got three or four questions, so I'll give you kind of category. One is about a technical question about frets on the bass.
Yeah.
Another one is about Michael McDonald.
Okay.
Another one is about creative process, and another one
Okay.
was about bass player influences. Where do you feel you want to go?
Well, let's grab the frets and then influences, and let's go through them. I'll try not to be too long-winded for the show.
Okay, first question. Alan Straw asks, he said, did you find it difficult at all adjusting to a fanned fret designed neck? Do you have a preference at this point to fanned fret over standard necks?
It took me about 5 seconds to get used to the fan frets. It really was not a big deal. The thing I love is the fan frets are on my Dingwall bass, and a great deal of my work has been replacing synth bass. And most guys that program synth parts really are sitting way at the bottom of the keyboards. And I was really not happy with most 5 strings that I heard. The B string never really rang true. When I tried a Dingwall for the first time, which has been about 16 or 18 years now, I've been playing them. With the fan frets, you have a 37-inch, I believe, B string. So the bottom end reads beautifully true. It's an action. I even have a hip shot detuner on my B string so I can drop it to an A. But as far as adjustment, some people say it's too weird for them. But for me, it felt natural the minute I started playing it. On 4-string, I've only had standard situations, and going back and forth, it's never been a big deal. The one thing I will say about frets is every one of my basses, I put mandolin fret wire on all my basses. I did it the first time in 1973, I think, and absolutely fell in love with it. The feel of them is so good. So every bass I've got in my signature basses all have come with mandolin fret wire. Done.
No, done.
Okay, here's another one. In fact, this is from Darren Perry. He says, "Hi, Cat, looking great. I have a question, if possible. I know Leland recently played on Wide Open, the album by Michael McDonald. Can you ask him what was it like working with Michael?"
I've known Michael for decades, and he's a very dear friend. When I worked on the record, he was not there. I was doing a project in Nashville with Shannon Forrest playing drums, who was the last drummer with Toto. So we'll get to Toto. More of this Kevin Bacon 6 Degrees stuff here. And he was co-producing, I believe, Michael's that record in Nashville. And we finished the session, and he said, "Can you come over to the studio? I've got some tracks I'd love for you to put bass on." And that was it. And that was when Michael was living in Nashville, but I think he was on the road at the time. So I just went in and just overdubbed bass on some songs. Michael wasn't there, but Michael is a dear friend, and he's one of the most talented, soulful people I know. And I just got 2 of his paintings, and he's a good painter too.
Oh, wow.
So, but I love Michael. He's one special cat. You know, his legacy is deep.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one more. This comes from Will Gustafson. Do you have a certain routine you do when you work on tunes for an artist, or when you are working on tunes, not the creative process? His example is, I usually get Chinese food and start making lists. Is there some, I guess he's trying to understand your process.
I'm not really sure. I mean, when it comes to like touring and learning material, my process is just do it over and over and over. When I got called to go out the first time to work with Toto, I mean, I had known the guys since they formed the band, and Jeff Porcaro was one of my best friends, and so, but I loved the idea of playing with them, and I hated the circumstances of why I was doing it, because Mike Porcaro was in the onset of ALS at that point, and he just could not do it anymore. And they still had like 6 months or something of tour left to go, and we're gonna maybe have to cancel it all. And Mike contacted me, and he asked me if I could take over for him. And the hard part was I was in the studio doing Steve Lukather's record at that point, one of his solo albums. And I had 5 days to to learn their show. And it's not an easy show. So for like the first 2 days, they gave me a mix of the show, and I drove around in my truck just listening to it, and kind of figured out the key. I figured out what the keys of each song were, and then listened to them and started visualizing the parts, because I wanted to go into it playing as close to Mike as I could, so that it wouldn't, even though we were similar players, we were different players. And I wanted it to feel as comfortable for the other band members as so they weren't having to adjust to a guy's new parts and all that. But that was really tough, because we did the first week, we flew to Dubai and did the Dubai Jazz Festival. And the next week we were in Paris filming their live Falling in Between DVD. And the drag was like, I would look at Simon Phillips like months later, we were still on the road, and we said, God, now I wish we were filming the show. Because at that point I was still thinking songs and, trying to remember everything. When it comes to that, if I'm going to do stuff live, I never use charts to learn. It's almost like heroin at that point. If I look down and I see a page with notes on it, it's really hard to forget that. So the easiest thing for me to do is to sit and just listen to the song in headphones, and then play along with it, and just play it and play it and play it until I've got it under my skin. Because it's a difficult thing. Like, if you go out on stage and you've got a music stand and charts in front of you, you look like hired help. Unless the whole band is, there's nothing wrong with it. If everybody's got charts, that's fine. But you don't want to be the odd man out, going out with a band that knows all their material, and then you're up there with your face buried in charts. So my process really is almost like a rat running a maze. I'm just going over the stuff until it's really under my skin. And like I said earlier, I'll be the guy sitting in the back practicing while everybody else is, hanging out, because I really need to know the material. And that's kind of it for me. If I'm doing projects like we just did the Grammy pre-show, which is, I wish they would televise that instead of the Grammy show, because the pre-show is fabulous. Oh, it's so much fun. And we had 80 pieces of music to do in that show. And they gave out like 40 awards, where the regular show gives like 8 or something like that. And we're playing with all these different artists, and the band is amazing and stuff. And we're just book, it's like a big phone book of music and stuff. And it's challenging and fun. I love doing those things. It's great. Okay. Any other question?
Can you do one more?
Well, no, not yet, because I'm going to have to pop in.
Okay. Okay, boss. Whatever you say, boss.
I really want to go back to Toto.
No. Okay.
Because Jeff and Mike were like brothers to you, and
literally.
So I see all the time on the Book of Faces, as I call it, and Instagram, even if it's their birthday or it's a moment where you want to talk about Toto. Golly, that it was a brotherhood that was so intense and so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you might expand a little bit about maybe a story, maybe a story you remember. I don't know if you're overseas, you're in America, but maybe a story.
Oh, there's lots of them with these lunatics. Steve, I've known Steve Lukather since he was 19 years old. I did some
I didn't know that.
Some of his very first sessions, but really one of the funniest moments was we were somewhere in Europe. I can't remember where it was, but the date became significant after the event took place. But Luke could be kind of a maniac at times. And Martin, who was the tour manager, came on the bus in the morning and said, "We're screwed, guys." And everybody's kind of like, what's going on? Nobody knew what was happening. They said, "Well, Luke got drunk last night, was in a fight, and he's in jail, and they're not letting him out. And we're going to end up, we have to cancel like the rest of the tour because, blah, it went in this whole thing, built it all up. And everybody's kind of like acting out, whatever. And I was so furious at that point because, I had dumped all my energy, and I thought, how can you be so irresponsible? And it just went on, and I was like really steaming at this point. I was really ready just to like deck somebody, just punch somebody out. And all of a sudden Luke comes in on the bus laughing, and he goes, "Gotcha, it was April 1st, and it was his April Fool's show." And man, I was so ready just to like punch
Knock him out.
Yeah, but I mean, with those guys, it was always so much fun with them. They are just a remarkable cast of characters. And the thing that's kind of was always interesting to me with Toto was, I mean, it's been through a number of incarnations because of, like when Jeff died, that was like one of those really fundamentally challenging things. What do you do with a band when you have this iconic musician in it? And it was good that they picked Simon Phillips to join the band at that point, because he was there would be no comparisons drawn with Jeff, because he was a very different kind of musician and brought a completely different spin to the music that they did from that point on. And David Page I had known because I'd worked with his father, Marty Page, who was a great engineer, arranger, composer, and I'd done movie projects with him and stuff. And so all the guys, we were all like friends in whatever incarnation was. And then when Simon left, they got Shannon Forrest, who lives in Nashville and is a fabulous, fabulous drummer who's very akin to Jeff. And so when I went back out a few years ago to play with them again, it was a completely different lineup of guys. The constant generally is Lukather, is the constant within it. But when I went out the first time with them, it was Tony Spinner playing guitar, and Greg Fillinganes was playing keyboards in it. It had Mavuto, Jenny, the background singer. So it's a whole different lineup. And then when I went out with them a couple of years ago, it was almost back to more of the original thing with David Page was in there. Steve Porcaro was also on keyboards. It was different, but having Shannon felt kind of like, it was sort of like being out with Jeff in that way, because he paid honor to Jeff's parts. And I love those cats. I mean, I really would have loved to have stayed with them, but when they went out after the year I was last out with them, that's when Phil decided to start working again. And Phil was my priority at that point. I mean, just because of long-term relationship. So I had to pass on going back out with them again, which really, it broke my heart because it was so much fun and they kick ass so hard live. I mean, it's such a great band.
I saw them in Nashville.
But yeah, you just, you do what you got to do, and you make your decisions and you live by them. Sometimes you make decisions. The one thing that is really critical is living by your word on things. And there's been times where I've said, yeah, I'll come do your session. And then all of a sudden something really big comes along for that day. I don't bail on people. I just say I can't do it. And I honor the session that I was originally booked to, unless it's something so big. And then I talk to them about it. I say, here's my situation. But it's really critical that you kind of live by an honest creed when it comes to doing this business, and people know it. And if you're the kind of person that'll bail on somebody at a moment's notice, word will get around and you're not going to get any calls.
Believe you me, I've dealt with many of them in Nashville.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's the human being can be really stupid at times. You got to be smart about this. And the thing is, it's fun being in this, but you also have to treat it. The fact that when you're doing your job, it's called playing, is a little deceptive, because you're not playing. This is a serious business and it's hard work. And there's times where I get a little frustrated by everything, where I kind of think it would have been great to have been in a band that was a big band that really made it. Because, I sit there a lot of times and I'll think about someone like Flea, and I go, man, all he's ever had to do basically is the Chili Peppers. Now, they worked hard to get to where they're at, but he makes tons and tons of money just knowing their book. Then he can go off and do whatever he wants, because Flea does lots of other projects, and he's really a talented cat and really a caring musician.
Yeah.
He has a school here in LA and everything. I mean, he's really, but I sit there and I go, I had somebody went through like all my stuff and came up with an estimate that I've recorded somewhere in the vicinity of 26,000 songs in my career. And I go, every time I get hired to do something, I'm basically like when I get called to work with you,
Yeah.
the way I look at it is it might be your only shot as an artist at doing what your dream is.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish that session and I'm going to go to another session. So my job continues, but the artist you're working with at that point, it might be their one and only chance at doing this. And so every time I take on a gig, it's like joining their band, and you treat it like you have a vested interest in this. It's not just a gig. It's not just hired help. That's why you go in and listen to playbacks and you make suggestions and you talk about things with the artists because it's important. And I've worked with artists that you just kind of walk out of there and you go, God, they're good. They're so good. And they make it. And you're so proud that you were, part of that whole thing that launched a career. And there's other times where you go, nobody's ever going to hear this again, but they've had the experience and they got to live their dream for the moment. And it's thrilling to watch that.
And that actually is what makes you extraordinary. And I wish more, matter of fact, I'm going to retract that statement. I hope that more musicians hear this and they understand that you are a part of something that's really miraculous, something that's really beautiful. And when somebody is giving their life through music, i.e. a lyricist or a singer, maybe they're not going to be a star, musicians. Maybe they're not. They're going to pay you to be there, to be part of their story. You're part of their journal. And I say that, and I certainly won't get teary-eyed, but you were part of my journal and have been part of my journey for over 15 years. And
Yeah.
I'm tremendously blessed. And I can only equivocate that to Judith Owen, who is remarkably talented and who has some extraordinary music. And if those listening have not heard of her, I love her. I think she's amazing. And to see you and Segundo, I'm spacing on Pedro Segundo, and there's a violinist who I love.
Yeah, when
cellist.
She works in different incarnations. When we do the string section, it's Lizzie Ball on violin and Gabriella Swallow on cello.
Yes.
And it's a unique thing. Judith is married to Harry Shearer, who was in Spinal Tap, and he does a ton of the voices on The Simpsons and stuff. And he's a really smart, brilliant, just a general all-around guy. And Judith is Welsh, and she's a singer-songwriter, pianist. But I always tell people, I said, if you took like Carole King and Joni Mitchell and all of them and kind of rolled them into one and put them on steroids, you'd kind of end up with Judith, because she's also just she's an actor. She's a funny person. But she's like, she's amazing. She's really great, and I love working with her and stuff. Do we have time for one funny story?
Yes, we do. I had to bring the Judith thing up because I have a tremendous respect for her, and I just had to pull it in. But yes, by all means.
Yeah. This was funny. When we're talking about people that have a dream, back in the early 70s, I was in the studio doing a Paul Anka record, and there was a guitarist on it named Michael Herndon. And then Michael sort of had dreams of becoming a studio guitarist, but it never kind of came together for him. So he went off and he became an oral reconstructive surgeon. And he has 2 clinics up in Northern California. Well, this time, but the thing that was great was I've done several albums with him. He's kind of a la James Taylor. He's a good guitarist, singer, songwriter. And he has a Pro Tools studio in his dental clinics. So he makes his records and then his demos. And then he comes down to LA and we go in the studio and we do his albums for him. Well, I had done a bunch of albums or done a bunch of work with Merle Haggard over the years. Mm-hmm. And I was in Nashville doing one of Merle's records. And the first day his vocals were kind of not good. And this was one of the greatest singers ever to grace country music or music, period. And the second day I came in, and he had been in there earlier and replaced all his vocals from the previous day. And I said, Merle, man, yesterday it sounded kind of shit, and today you sound great. I said, what happened? And he said something to me I know I'll never hear again as long as I work in this business. He looked at me and he said, my singing teeth arrived. He had worn the wrong dentures and he couldn't enunciate as well. But the thing was, he lived up his compound where he lived, where I did some recording up there with Larry London. We went up to his Merle's place in Redding, California. I turned him on to Michael Herndon, and Michael ended up doing complete reconstruction of Merle's mouth for him. And they could go down in the Pro Tools studio, and Merle, while he was doing the procedures, could sing to make sure nothing Michael was doing was messing with his vocals. And then as a thank you, beyond paying him, he did a duet with Michael on the last album that they did together. So, you know, it's just weird how these things all just go around. I mean, it's one of these things, like every day you get up and you go, this might suck, or this could be a great adventure today. Let's have an adventure.
Yeah, let's have, such a great way.
Yeah.
I will end it there, but I'm going to ask you one question. I'm sure that Tom may have questions in the chat room.
Yeah.
Is there a specific moment in your life, in your music life, that you look at and go, not the apex, but something that really just scored you? It just hit you, it burned you, it went in a good way, and it stayed. Is there something that jumps out? I mean, you've got so many, Lee.
You know, it's almost like every day, you know, there's something. I mean, there's certainly live moments that I can go through a litany of experiences in live concerts where you just kind of stand there and it sucks the breath right out of you. It's such astounding moments. We would feel that way every night with Phil Collins when we play In the Air Tonight, and it would build up towards that drum fill. And you'd be I mean, we were playing, you know, 70,000 seat stadiums, and you would see all these hands come up with drumsticks, all playing air drums for that drum fill. And we'd all just go, God damn, it's amazing. But one of the great moments too that was like that was when James Taylor recorded Another Dream in Rio. We were touring Brazil, and at the time we were in Sao Paulo, but we were playing a soccer stadium. It might have been 110,000 seat soccer stadium in Sao Paulo. And when we played that, everyone in the audience was flicking a lighter on the beat on it. But from the stage, because of the delay, you saw this wave of fire running the entire length of the stadium. And we almost stopped playing. It was like kind of so staggering to see this visual. But there's lots of moments like that, and other times where you've found yourself just in situations in different places in the world, and you just kind of, you know, you'll find as a kid growing up, we never traveled as a family. We might drive up the coast to San Francisco or something like that. But it's weird when you are in a situation like you're in Tokyo and somebody for some reason walks up to you and goes and wants to know how to get to Roppongi from where we are. And I go, oh no, it's just you take the train, you go down that. And then afterwards I go, why the hell do I know my way around Tokyo, kind of thing, you know, or Paris or any place, you know. But it's been a wonderful journey, and the thing I'm excited about is that it's not over, that I'm not living on past laurels. When people ask me about albums I've worked on and things like that, sometimes I'm really hard pressed to remember. I mean, I've worked on about 2,600 albums, and I'll seize up and I have no idea what I've worked on when I'm talking to people, because I don't think about it. I kind of all that's been in my book today is thinking about us and doing this. And then I'm thinking about tomorrow and which song I'm going to be doing, because I've been posting all these songs on Facebook during this period of quarantine. So, you know, it's one of these things. I still find this business and this life exhilarating. And I mean, I'll be turning 73 at the end of May, and I go, man, it's still fun. And I was, you know, like 20 when I started this, so
You're a rare bird, from Bernadette Peters to
Oh, yeah.
James Taylor. I mean, how you flip between everybody.
Oh, I was sitting there the other day when I was listening to the Sinatra station and just thinking about I mean, some of my favorite people, like was working with Johnny Mathis and Andy Williams and all these guys, and you just go, God, I feel so fortunate when I look at all that stuff, and I just go, man, it's been a fun run. But let's, if we have the time, any other questions?
Is there any other questions in the chat room?
We just got one more. We got this one you might like, and this would be actually a great question. Matt Creeks asks, and this is 3 parts to this. He kind of asks, he says,
okay,
who are the bass players that you really took notice of, and where does Jerry Scheff rank with you, and are you guys coming back? So you got, who are your influences, and who are the bass players that took notice of, where does Jerry Scheff rank, and are you guys coming back?
Well, the only one I don't understand is the last one. Are we coming back to what? I mean, I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. I didn't know I left. But,
exactly. Okay.
But
so tell everybody who Jerry Scheff is.
Well, Jerry Scheff, I think is one of the finest bass players of the generation. His work with Elvis was unbelievable, and he also, his son is Jason Scheff, who was the singer bass player with Chicago for many years. But Jerry was just one of the bass players that I really love. And he's up there with Chuck Rainey and Riney Press, and there's a whole bunch of those guys. For me, bass, when I first started, I started playing piano when I was like 4.5 or 5. And I grew up as a classical snob. I only studied classical music. By the time I was 12, I was pretty neurotic from stress and pressure of performing and learning. And when I went into junior high school, I kind of went in with the attitude like, well, here's your piano players arrived. And Ted Lynn, who I credit with my career, was the music teacher in my junior high and high school, because I went to a 6-year school. He said, we got plenty of piano players. We need somebody to play string bass. And he pulled out an old K upright from the back room and put it in my hands. And I just plucked a note holding it and felt that vibration. And I just said, sold, let's do it. And he gave me some rudimentary lessons on it. And at that point, I was listening to like Red Callender and Brown and Mingus and all these guys. What really wasn't until the Beatles hit and McCartney that it really made me kind of stand at attention and go, well, something's really going on. And then with the English invasion, I was totally into it. I mean, Paul was a major influence, but all those guys that came out of it, they were remarkable players that came through that whole thing. And certainly I was when I was in college, Cream came and played in the gymnasium in '68. And I'm standing there watching Jack Bruce just going, God, check this cat out. Not only is he like the monster singer, but he's like this monster bass player, harp player, everything. And then, I was a Who fan and with Ant Whistle. And but there's an element to me, almost everybody who's picked up this instrument, you could have one bass and put 20 bass players in a room with it, unbeknownst to each other, and have them all play, and it would sound like 20 different instruments. And to me, that's kind of the fun of it. I love, like, I'm pretty much an insomniac, so I'll stay up all night and watch things on YouTube and see just remarkable musicians, and anything from somebody who's like, you see some 4-year-old monster and you go, what did this child, channel to get this going on at this age, up to somebody who's in their 90s and still playing. So I kind of have an appreciation for the community of bass players, not so much specific guys, because there's so many guys that you've got the Les Claypools, and you have the Geddy Lees, and you have the Chris Squires, and you have just this absolute litany of players. There's amazing bass players in LA. Michael Rhodes in Nashville is a dear old friend of mine. And Michael, held down that seat, and Matt McKenzie and a whole bunch of guys in town there, because I did a lot of work in Nashville for a decade and a half. I used to come down there all the time, did all of Jimmy Bowen's records. But it's like so many of these things. It's like people ask me, who's your favorite drummer that you've worked with? I go, man, my gig is so good because it's allowed me to play with the greatest drummers in the world.
I know.
And they've run the whole gamut of players, from massive fusion guys to the simplest people, and I appreciate them all. And so I'm really humbled by being a part of the music community, and that's what I'm most grateful for.
I have a couple of questions for you, and I know we've gone over, but that's okay. Back in the day with Troubadour, and then the Troubadour tour, you've told me a couple of stories about Joni Mitchell and James Taylor, Carole King. These are some of my idols, people I look at and I have tremendous respect for. And so my first question is, do you have a story that maybe nobody knows, whether it's James Taylor, Carole King, Joni Mitchell, something that might be kind of fun for people to hear? That's A. And B, follow that by talking very briefly to the musicians who are watching, because I know that and I can see that there are a lot of musicians watching, and I wonder if you may have some, I'll call it advice, maybe some foresight for them. So let's go.
Yeah, as far as James and Carole and Joni, it was always a unique experience to be around all of them, because you're kind of looking at some very, very unique individuals. When we first started, the very first band we had with James Taylor was Danny Korchmar, Russ Kunkel, myself, and Carole King was the piano player in the group. And it was James who really, we all did, but James really pushed her. He said, you should get out there and do your own thing too. And then all of a sudden, she was doing some of her songs, like at the beginning of the show. And next thing you know, she cuts Tapestry, and then we have to get rid of her because we have a sideman in the group who has the biggest record in the world. So it's kind of a funny situation. But I always loved it, like, when Joni would be hanging out, because she and James were an item for a while. And plus there was that whole scene, Graham Nash and Crosby and Jackson and all these people, J.D. Souther. It was just a scene that had such a vibrancy to it and so much talent in these areas. I mean, there were absolutely crazy things with James, especially in the early days. But it was one of these things that no matter how crazy things were, the minute we would hit the stage, it got serious. But one of the funniest things with James was, I think we played, it must have been in Boston, I think. But Carole had just written You've Got a Friend. Yeah. And James just asked her if it was cool if he did it. And so we were sitting backstage, and it was just that we were out as a trio. It was Russ and James and myself. And we learned the song backstage, and we get out to play the show. And James says to the audience, he says, now we got a brand new song here written by Carole King that I want to play for you. And we've just learned it. And if you hear any wrong notes, it's Lee. I go, oh, this is really nice. So we play the song. We play You Got a Friend. Every bass note is wrong. And when it's over, I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and the audience is kind of looking up there. And I would not take a bullet for this guy at this point. And I said, James, what song did we play before this? Country Road. Did you remember to tune up from a drop D? And he had forgotten to tune his guitar up. So he always had bass parts going with his thumb. So basically every note he played with his thumb was a whole step off from me. So, and he looked at the audience. He said, there isn't a spatula big enough to wipe the egg from my face. So that's great. It was a funny moment. But with those people, there's always going to be crazy moments, because crazy people, and that's part of the creative process with them, is they're just nuts. And
were they just being nuts? Were they just being nuts and doing their music and loving their music and completely 100% into their music? Or were they,
yeah,
the backup plan was, okay, I'm going to go be a bartender and then I'm going to do my music? Or
I don't think
what did it feel like back then?
I don't think it was ever plan Bs with those people. I mean, really gifted artists, you're so driven that you do whatever you can to do what you do.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's really devastating because they never get there, no matter how much talent they've got. And it's frustrating to see that happen. But it's the nature of the beast. Not everybody's going to make it. And but with them, they were, the seriousness would happen. As crazy as things could be on the road, when we'd hit the stage, it was serious. It was fun, but everybody brought their A game. Nobody was up there, treating this lightly. We all knew how fortunate we were that we were getting to do this, and still do.
Yeah. Matter of fact, you still do all the time. So I don't know if there are any other questions in the chat room before we go. Tom?
We got a tech question.
Oh, we do.
Same guy that
fine.
asked the question earlier about the frets. He says, okay, ready for this?
Yeah.
Why didn't the Dingwall Lee Sklar signature bass have a producer
switch?
Yeah.
It's you could probably talk them into it. I don't have one on my Dingwall though, so you're not really missing out on it. But on my signature Warwick bass. Now I've got two signature basses. I've got a signature bass with Dingwall, and I have one with Warwick. I don't want to be one of those guys where people go, this guy will just put his name on anything, just to make money and all that. First off, the deals I have on my signature stuff, that anything I've ever endorsed, I've never received a penny for. I do it strictly to try to move a better product. But I've never received a penny. So anybody that's buying any of those things, I'm not getting a cut of it. But they're completely different instruments. The Dingwall is a solid body 5-string, and the Warwick is a chambered body 4-string, and they're completely different instruments, and I use them in very different ways. But on my Warwick, we did do a producer switch on that. But real quickly, I'll tell you the producer switch story. Years ago, I might have been Knight Rider or one of those shows at Universal Studios, because Universal lot used to have a really great recording studio on it. We used to do a lot of the TV shows there. So I'm sitting behind a baffle, and when you're on those baffles, you look like Kilroy. This is about all you see of the musicians. And I'm sitting next to Tommy Tedesco, and the conductor's across the room. And it was probably 30-piece, 40-piece orchestra in there, and they're saying. And they say, hey, Tommy, could you play some mandolin or something for us on this one? So Tommy bends down, picks it up, plays. They go, no, that's not it. Could you try? And they went through about 5 different instruments, and Tommy would go, okay, I'll try another one. And I'm dying because I'm sitting next to Tommy, and he only has his acoustic guitar with him. So he just keeps bending over like he's picking something else up. But he's still got the same instrument in his hands. And he's just playing in different positions until they finally heard what they wanted. And I'm dying. And I looked at him, I said, I just learned more in 5 minutes how this works than I did in all my years of school. So I went home with the bass I was using at the time, and I drilled a hole in it and had a Switchcraft toggle switch, and didn't have any wires or anything going to it, but I just put that in the bass so that if producers would say, if it was a knowledgeable producer, I wouldn't do this. But if it was some guy that didn't know what the hell they were talking about, and they would say, can you make it shimmer a little, make it a more mauve? I would make sure they could see me flip the switch, and I'd flip and then play in a little different position. And they would go, cool, that's great, man, thank you. And it just saved me a lot of, chasing my tail over something completely nebulous that made no sense whatsoever.
And
the thing that was really great was, in the old days when Jim Roberts was the editor of Bass Player magazine, every April they would put in fake ads for April Fools that people didn't know were fake ads, and they put in an ad for the Leland Sklar producer switch, and they said they got hundreds and hundreds of requests on how people could buy those and wanted to know all about it. And it was just, all they'd have to do is go to the electronics store and buy a toggle switch and just, put it in their instrument. So that was my producer switch thing, but they didn't use it as an option, but you could add it if you want.
That's classic. And I have so much I'd like to say about producers who don't know a lot about the actual musicians and the music.
Oh, we're back to Ned again? Oh no.
Ned would kill us. No, mayday.
No, talk about a knowledgeable producer. That's Ned Albright.
He's got, certainly, actually he does. He's got some good knowledge.
But what a knucklehead.
Some producers, well, we'll leave it at that. I won't
I'm
not going to leave it negative. I will say this, Lee, thank you so much for being amazing.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
I would, any time you ever want to do this, you just let me know. I'm happy to come back and we can take more personal journeys and stuff. Be my pleasure.
I have probably about 2 more hours worth of questions, but you know what? We just can't stay on for 2 more hours. I want, I love you to death and I'm really grateful for you. I'm grateful for you because you're an extraordinary musician and just a powerful presence in so many people's lives. I'm also tremendously grateful because you're a dear friend, and thank you for being on. I want you to stay healthy as everyone watching.
Yeah. Yes, please, everybody. Just lay low. Hopefully this will get resolved. It's probably going to be later than sooner, but we all have to keep a positive energy going, because if you don't have that, then it's like, why even be here?
Amen to that.
So,
and for everybody, stay strong, stay positive. And I would say a lesson from Leland Sklar, I'm going to say it for you, Lee, is be extraordinarily great at what you do.
Yeah.
And be somebody everybody loves to work with.
And one other thing, I forgot to even mention this.
Yeah.
I got serious about it. And I'm actually working on my book of people giving me the finger.
Oh, it's the finger. I forgot. And we can do this, I think, on this YouTube. I don't know if we can, but that's
sure,
right.
Sure. But no, I've gotten involved with some people. I'm probably going to self-publish this, and I'll probably do either a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter campaign, which would get donation people, personal autograph books and all that. But I've been going through it. Part of my time here, I'm going through 11,000 photographs of people I've taken, giving me the finger, trying to hone this down. So it's going to be really fun. It'll be a coffee table book. So I'll keep you posted about that too.
Please do, because it's everybody from Vince Gill to friggin' Bonnie Raitt to me.
You're in there.
I'm in there. Steve Lukather, everybody in there.
But it's humanity. I've got athletes and musicians, people on the street, people on airplanes, people everywhere. I just go up to people and say, flip me off. I've got Jack Nicholson and Gwyneth Paltrow and all these people and stuff. So it's really a hoot, because to me, it's like there's a finger, but the thing I love is people's faces when they do it.
I know.
It's like infinite. So that's another thing in the works right now, is my giving the finger book.
I love that. And
so I'll keep you posted on that.
Raise funds over the internet. Everybody's going to raise funds. I love it. I love it. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on.
I love you, Kat. I'm so happy to be here. This has just been great.
Love you right back, and be safe and be healthy. And I'll talk to you real soon.
Stick around. Don't hang up yet.
Okay.
Babe.